Hey there, fellow streakers, it's Jeff. And yes, I am without my co-pilot today, Jami. We have been just absolutely up to our eyeballs getting ready for a fantastic event that's coming up. Yes, a fantastic event in our family's life. That would be our third daughter is getting married. We have two already married. Our third is getting married. And we are in preparations as I give this podcast in order to travel from Georgia to Utah, where our daughter will be married to a great young man. His name's Caleb. Caleb and Natalia, well wedding wishes, and thank you very much, all of you who have sent in your well wedding wishes for Natalia and Caleb. We are so excited to have the party with them. So Jami is in the midst of preparation. She's got the everything happening, and she just said to me, "Hey, can you take the podcast today?" And I said, "Absolutely. We'll make this happen, and then we'll get both of us back on in a little bit." So hopefully you're okay with that. Hopefully, as we have a little bit of a conversation about streaking, you're okay. Welcome to the podcast. If you're new, usually I have Jami here with me. She's the co-author on the book Streaking. And if you haven't had a chance to get the book and read it, please do so. It will really describe and help you understand all the different aspects of streaking. We had our first Streaking Speak with the authors yesterday. It was a webcast that we did. Had a great audience. Had some great questions in there about some of the ways to set up your streaks and get your streaks going. One question in particular I wanted to address just on the podcast, and it was this one. He said, "What if you're embarrassed to share your first streak?" Because the laws of streaking indicate, one, that first of all, it's laughably simple. And if it's laughably simple, that may mean it's a little bit embarrassing. And two, you have no record, no streak. That's law number 2, no record, no streak. And number 3, you create a community around it. So those are the 3 laws of streaking. So now you're getting into streaking. You're starting your first streak, such as write at least one sentence daily. And you have figured out that it's really simple and that people may or may not laugh at it. However, and here's the neat part, and this is what I wanted to share, because the question is what if you don't want to share your streak because it's so embarrassingly simple? One of the great things about the streaking community is we all have that embarrassingly simple streak. Every single one of us are laughing at that particular streak. So what that means is you can share it with confidence. You can share whatever it is that's laughably simple for you with confidence, knowing that all of us are that way. And knowing that the reason why it's a little bit embarrassing is because it's the first time where we've employed consistency in a process way in order to achieve a state of being, who we want to be going forward. So that's just one of the questions that I wanted to address, because it comes up every once in a while as you think about creating a community. And inside of the Streaking app, which you can download at Google Play or at the Apple App Store, inside the Streaking app, you can request people to be your friend. And then if they decide to be one of your friends, you can share your streak with them. And in sharing your streak with them, that creates this opportunity for celebration. Everyone can celebrate it. All right, so it was really neat. It was a fun webcast to do, and Jami and I look forward to doing it in the future. Now, on to the topic at hand. For the month of April, what we thought we would discuss and cover is professional streaks, or what I'll call the streaking professional. We've talked a lot about, the month of January, we talked about the health and fitness streaks and getting yourself going. In the month of February, we talked about relationships, because there's all kinds of things that you can do inside of relationships of consistency to improve your marriage, your family, your children. In the month of March, we were talking about luck and how to make your own luck, which relates a little bit to professional streaks. But this month in particular, in April, we're going to talk all about how you use streaking to develop yourself professionally. When you are in the marketplace and you have an opportunity to share with people what it is you want to do or how you want to do it. When I say people, I mean potential employers or people, you're starting a business and so you're trying to attract customers. All of those things require consistency. And that consistency brings about significant success. So the month of April is dedicated to professional streaks. And we've got all kinds of different material that we're going to be covering in the month of April. we're going to start out, or I'm going to start out, since it's me solo today, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the streaks that I've established in my professional career and why I have them. When we started streaking, when Jami and I started this whole process of streaking, we started it because we wanted to be healthy people. And usually most streaks dwell in that area. In fact, there's another app out there called Streaks, Streaks, and that one is specifically aimed at health and wellness, which is great. That one I looked at and started when I was way back first streaking I used that app just a little bit. However, once I got about 300 days in and found out that streaking could be used for so much more than just the health and wellness, and that it could be used for, my personal development, then I got into how it could be used for my professional development. And as I started to look at my professional life, I asked myself the question, what I do professionally, are there streaks that can benefit what I do professionally? So what do I do professionally? Let me give you just a little bit of background on what I do professionally. I have, for the last 10 years, worked as a consultant for Franklin Covey, for the Franklin Covey Company. And in that time, have worked specifically with the 4 disciplines of execution. 4 Disciplines of Execution is a book that's been written by Chris McChesney, Sean Covey, and Jim Hewling. And I got in, 10 years ago when the book was very first being published, and started to do a lot of consulting work with executive teams. Well, in my work that I do, I am always working with executive teams. And part of that work is, what I'll say is working with some very intelligent, brilliant people. And to be in the room with intelligent, brilliant people, with those men and women, is sometimes intimidating, a lot of times intimidating. And so I would, look at what it was I was doing. And other than studying and understanding the 4 disciplines of execution, I needed to know a little bit more within the realm of what an executive deals with on a regular basis. Now, not that I hadn't been, because prior to coming to working with Franklin Covey, I was the chief revenue officer for a company that I had started with a couple of partners called Best Practice Systems. Now, Best Practice Systems is an e-bill company. It sounds kind of like Best Practice Systems, maybe a process company or something like that. No, we were an e-bill company, which meant way back when, we had to explain it all the time. I think you know what it is today. Basically, you pay your bills online and you receive a copy of your bill online. There's probably many, many people that do that now. Well, back then when we were starting it, it was just in its infancy, and we were able to take that company, Best Practice Systems, from a startup all the way through to one of the fastest 500 companies growing in America. And it was great. We sold that company, and that's when I came to work for Franklin Covey. So in working with executives and in striving diligently to not feel like an imposter, Jami and I have talked a little bit about that as far as the imposter syndrome, but to not feel like an imposter when I'm working with individuals who are running, multi-million and billion-dollar organizations and working with them to apply the 4 disciplines of execution, I didn't want to feel like an imposter. And I thought to myself, what is it that I can do? So enter streaking. About 10 years with Franklin Covey. We've been doing streaking for 6 years. And so this would have been, my 5th year into Franklin Covey, right? Or maybe, 6 years. We got 5th year into Franklin Covey. After we had discovered streaking and started to uncover the principles of it, I started to look at what I could do in order to improve my professional life. One of the things that happens when you go in to work with executives, or often what happens, is that executive will share with you some of the books that they have been reading. And inevitably, one of the questions that they'll ask is, have you read this book? And this could be any popular business book. One of the most popular authors out there, Jim Collins, he wrote Good to Great. He wrote Great by Choice and several other titles. Does a lot of research within what makes companies successful. Many of his books are read by executive teams. And so as, I would be asked these questions, Jim Collins only being one of them, several others. I think of Malcolm Gladwell. He's another one where he has some really interesting points on how societies are run. You look at some of the classics, Peter Drucker, who writes a lot of business books and was a management guru. Ram Charan, another one. Larry Bossidy, another one. All of these authors who have studied business, looked at business, or been successful at business. One of my favorite ones was Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, the founder of Nike. That was a great book to read. And others, again, executives would be reading these books. And there's a whole bunch of reasons as to why you read the books, right? I mean, you want to get better insight into your business. You want to get better insight into how you can lead as a leader. All of these things are communicated through the different business books, and you either listen to them or you are reading them. Well, I was not reading them. Just to put it bluntly, I had immersed myself so significantly in learning the 4 Disciplines of Execution, which is another book that's out there, that I had neglected some of the other things that would help me to round out my consulting profession. As I was moving in the direction of consulting more executive teams, I remember there was one particular poignant moment. I was in an executive's office, or no, it was in the conference room. I remember this. I was in the conference room, and the executive that was there, he and I could tell, by looking at him and the interactions that we had, we were about the same age. And he had asked me what were some of the books that I'd been reading lately. And honestly, I had not been reading a lot, and I kind of flubbed an answer. It's not that I hadn't been reading at all, but I really wasn't invested in any book. And when I said to him, the couple of books that I may have been reading at that particular time, and not even reading, that's probably an overstatement, but glancing at, he then shared with me 4 or 5 books that he had read and some of the different things that he had learned from those books, the precepts, principles, concepts, to help him be a better leader. And I came away from that experience thinking, I am deficient and an imposter at this point in time. What is it that I can do differently in order to be not an imposter and continue to round myself out? That's when it hit me. I needed a streak. I needed a streak to be consistent in something that I was not consistent in. That was reading on a regular basis. Now, this may be a kind of a duh, Jeff. You couldn't figure that out earlier. It wasn't that I couldn't figure it out earlier. It's just that I didn't have a system in place, or I didn't have the streaking in place in order to do that. So what I decided is, as I looked at myself and what it was that was happening, I decided that I would start a reading streak. And that reading streak was to read at least 1 paragraph in a nonfiction book daily. Now, I chose that streak and I have it worded in the way that it is very specifically. So first of all, it couldn't be a fiction book. Because honestly, fiction books for me, easier to read. I enjoy a good fantasy, sci-fi novel. That's kind of my genre. It's what I enjoy. A little shout out to Brandon Sanderson out there. If you haven't read Brandon Sanderson and you're into fantasy or into epic novels, and his are epic. The Way of Kings is absolutely phenomenal. I didn't have a problem reading those books. But when it came to reading nonfiction books, that was not something I was consistent in and not something I sought for. So I purposely said, okay, it's got to be a nonfiction book. Now, the second thing that I decided was, what type of streak did this need to be? And what I mean by that is the frequency and also the difficulty. And when we look at law number 1, make it laughably simple, I started to consider, okay, what is laughably simple for me in reading? Is it a chapter? Nope, not laughably simple. Is it a page? Now, some may say that, yeah, come on, that's laughably simple. Not for me. Is it a paragraph? You know what? Yeah, I think I'm there. Is it a sentence? It was between a sentence and a paragraph that I was deciding. And I decided, as I looked at a business book that I was reading at the time, that, you know what? I could probably handle a paragraph on my worst day at the worst time. And so that's how I then determined that I would read at least 1 paragraph in a nonfiction book daily. One of the other things, just a little side note here, but related to what it is I'm talking about, that we talked about in our webcast, was someone had brought up and talked about the laughably simple. And Jami referenced back to a podcast that we had with Craig Christensen, where he had told the story to his mom about how he had a streak to do at least one push-up daily, and she just burst out laughing. I mean, the food flew from her mouth because they're at the dinner table and eating, and she just burst out laughing. And she said, "How is that going to do anything?" And he said, "Mom, that's not where I stop. That's where I start." A lot of times the streak is about the start. It's not about the stop. And I think that there's this period of disbelief in our brain that says, if I do something laughably simple, that's where I'm going to stop. And the reason we think that is because in the past we had been so not inconsistent at the big, the bold, and the beautiful that we think that we're not going to be consistent in anything else. We have deluded ourselves or deceived ourselves into thinking that we're not going to be consistent. When in actuality, we just didn't have the right tool. And the right tool was the streak. And the streak is the thing that I do daily, weekly, or monthly, uninterrupted, and I share it with people and I record that I've done it. That's the streak. And when I do the streak laughably simple, then I set myself up for success. You set yourself up for success. And so when I looked at this particular thing, read at least one paragraph in a nonfiction book daily, I thought to myself, you know what? At least I can do that. Now, there is a dependency in here. And we've talked in streaking, you know that you've got to weigh the dependencies when you're talking about laughably simple, because what's the dependency? I got to have a book to read. That's the dependency. If I don't have the book to read, then it's going to be very difficult to have the streak. So one of the activities I do on a regular basis to support this streak is I'm looking for the next book to read, which brings me to the point of setting that particular streak with the executive. Because now what I did when I went in to work with executives is I would ask them, what are some of the books that you've been reading of late? And inevitably, they would bring one up that I hadn't heard about or that I hadn't considered that was either from a long time in the past or maybe it was new. And I would write that book down. Or what I would do is go into my iBooks or my Kindle and I would reserve that book for later reading so that when I was ready to get there, I could download it and go on reading. It prepared me in many ways to have good, positive conversations, not necessarily with the executive, but with myself. I started to see within myself the areas of improvement that I had always wanted, but it was small. It was simple. It was literally at least one paragraph. And then as I got hold of something, maybe a paragraph, I would often read a lot more. And there were many times where I'd read several pages because the topic interested me and it got me to this place where I could now start to enjoy it. Streaking is about starting. It's about starting something in your professional development that allows you to get to where you need to be. There's a whole bunch of other people that we're going to bring on the show in this month for professional development. One of the people we're going to bring on is Talon, who has, just gone after with a vengeance a couple of professional streaks that I'll let him introduce that have opened up vistas and doorways for him that he otherwise didn't see. So that's Talon. He's our Chief Marketing Officer inside of Streaking LLC. We're going to bring him on. I'm also going to be talking with Danny, who is a professional engineer, and we're going to talk with him about his professional streaks. We'll also talk with a couple of other people in regards to their professional streaks, and we also have a really neat story. We shared it yesterday on when we did the webcast, which actually the webcast was a couple of days ago. When we did the webcast, we shared a story about a woman who had written into us and talked to us about what she had been doing with streaking and how it had changed her. She owned her own business. As we talk about professional streaks, I'd like to invite you to think about where you want to be professionally. And this is where we'll end up the podcast today. And hopefully I've been okay today. Solo without Jami is always a little bit tough because she adds and has so much flavor and richness that she brings to the conversation. Hopefully I've represented her well. But I wanted to just end with this. Who do you want to be professionally? What does that look like? Do you want to be a doctor, a lawyer? Some of those come out right away. Do you want to be a professional sales associate or a leader of business of some sort? Maybe you want to be in marketing. Maybe you want to own your own business. Maybe you want to be a business owner and someone who provides opportunities for others. Maybe you want to be an educator. You want to help young people or people of all ages to learn and grow and become someone new or different, or maybe a consultant. Had a fascinating conversation with a young man who's in college who wants to be a consultant, and he was asking me what he could do. I, of course, talked to him all about streaks and being consistent. I mean, think about this for just a second. As you aim at who you want to be, and we'll discuss this in future podcasts this month, but as you aim at who you want to be, and you see that destination, and now you start a streak to become that person. So, for example, you want to be a consultant. And as a consultant, you need to be abreast of all the different management philosophies. And let's say it's a management consultant. Management philosophies are out there. And so you start a streak to read at least one paragraph in a nonfiction book regarding business leadership or management. And let's say now you've had that going for 2 years, and you are in competition for a job, and that job is a consulting job. And as you look at that, you go into it, your resume got you in the door because you've done some work and you've been successful at your career, and you sit down and you're sitting across from the person who's interviewing you, and they ask you, a little bit about yourself and what it is that you've been doing in order to be someone who could be a candidate or potentially be the person to fill this position. And instead of telling them all about your accomplishments, what you do is you pull out your streaking app and you show them the 3 or 4 streaks that you've had over the last 3 years of reading at least one paragraph in a nonfiction book, of getting one piece of feedback in order to improve your communication skills on a weekly basis, and of writing at least one sentence daily. And you show them that you've been doing that for 2 or 3 years. Do you think that that might be something that impresses the person with whom you're interviewing to say, wow, this individual is serious, and I would rather hire the person who's consistent rather than the one that has shown me a whole bunch of accomplishments, but I don't know their consistency. I would rather hire the person that's doing the inputs in order to get where they need to be or to become who they want to be. That's the person I want to hire. That's what we're going to be talking about this month. Well, I've enjoyed the conversation with you this morning. Hopefully you've enjoyed the conversation as well. We'll get Jami back on a future podcast after we get this wedding under our belt. We are excited for it. I'm looking forward to it. And for those of you who will be at the wedding with us, look forward to seeing you there. Until we talk again, feel free, obviously, to shoot me an email, Jeffrey, Jefffery, at streakingmastery.com, or you can email Jami, Jami, at streakingmastery.com. Email her and let her know how much you missed her. And we'll get back with you just as soon as we can. Let us know what some of your professional streaks are, some of the things that you've thought about. But until we talk again, as always, keep streaking.